Hi, my name's Malis, and 2 months ago, my parents called me useless and erased me from the company I helped build. They didn't argue. They didn't thank me. They just voted me out. They thought the clients would never notice I was gone. But when their biggest $5 million deal started falling apart, guess who they came crawling back to? And what stings more than being discarded? Being remembered only when everything starts to burn. You ever been cut out by your own family, only to realize they were always planning it? Yeah, me too. I showed up 15 minutes early, like always. My keycard buzzed green at the glass doors of the main conference suite. Inside, the polished table gleamed under soft halogen lights, and the air conditioning hummed low and indifferent. I'd expected the usual prep session. Quarterly reports, budget allocation, maybe even some talk about the Dubai rollout. What I didn't expect was to see them all already seated. Vernon, my father, at the head of the table, tapping his fingers against the armrest. Callista, my older sister, flipping through her phone like she couldn't care less. Serena from HR, posture tight as a power cord, and one empty seat, mine. I sat down, careful and quiet, straightening my blazer just to feel my hands doing something. "We're not going to dance around this," Dad started without even greeting me. His voice was flat, cold. "This isn't a planning session, it's a realignment discussion." Realignment. I've learned that when people in leadership say that word, what they mean is, you're no longer part of the picture. Callista didn't even look up from her phone. Vernon leaned back, clasped his hands together like a judge about to pass sentence. "There was a vote," he said. "Last week, the executive team and the board agreed it's time for a change in direction. Streamlined, fresh energy." I blinked. What vote? He didn't answer that. Just looked at me like he was expecting gratitude for his delivery. "You weren't on the email," Callista finally chimed in, smiling at something on her screen. "Must have slipped through. It's been buggy lately." I laughed once, dryly. "Et tu, Dad?" Silence. Not confusion, just discomfort. They weren't surprised. They knew what they were doing. "You're not being let go," Serena said quickly. "Just repositioned. We're restructuring legacy roles." Legacy roles. That was the term they used for my position. The same one I'd built over 8 years of handling all Middle Eastern accounts. The same one they used to count on when a deal fell through last minute in Doha or Riyadh. I didn't respond. Not out loud. Inside, I was screaming. But outside, I nodded once. Just once. "I understand." I stood up before anyone could start another sentence, wrapped in fake empathy. I walked out with steady steps, heels clicking sharp and final against the tile. Back at my desk, I sat and stared at the blinking cursor on the client dashboard. I started to draft a quick transition summary, because professionalism was still a reflex. But before I could finish the second sentence, my screen froze. Session expired. I tried to log back in. My password no longer worked. When I called IT, the response was robotic. "Your access has been terminated by a senior administrator. We were not given details." I thanked them anyway. That's what people like me do, even when they're bleeding. I packed my things slowly. Just the essentials. A framed photo of the Dubai launch, a notebook filled with handwritten cultural annotations, and a marble paperweight I'd brought back from Muscat. Everything else could rot here. In the elevator, I let out a breath I hadn't realized I'd been holding. My reflection in the mirrored walls looked pale, small, but steady. "They didn't even look me in the eye," I whispered. Walking through the lobby felt like walking out of my own funeral. No one looked up. No one stopped me. And maybe that hurt more than words ever could. It was like I'd already been gone. Outside, the afternoon light hit the glass building just right, warping my reflection into something unrecognizable. I held my box tighter and kept walking. The air smelled like early spring, faint jasmine and car exhaust. That's when my phone buzzed. Unknown number, international prefix, Arabic country code. I stared at it for a second too long. Then I picked up. The engine purred steady beneath me as I merged onto Pacific Coast Highway. The sun was already slipping past the horizon, casting long gold streaks across the water that made the whole ocean look like it was on fire. I didn't turn on the radio. The silence felt earned. In my passenger seat sat the cardboard box from earlier, small but heavy in the way grief can be when it's folded into paper and glass. I hadn't even unpacked it. A part of me didn't want to look at what they had let go. Halfway between Malibu and Santa Monica, my phone buzzed again, but I ignored it. The call from the UAE earlier had gone unanswered. I wasn't ready, not yet. My head still echoed with the finality of my father's tone. And Callista's smile, that smug, polished smile that always made me feel like she knew something I didn't. Turns out, she had. The coastline blurred past, but my mind rewound to the prep meeting the week before. We were sitting in the executive lounge, Dad, Callista, and me. She stood confidently in front of the projector, wearing her usual white-on-white outfit that made her look like a lifestyle influencer rather than a director of anything. "I've been thinking," she began, flipping to a slide titled, "The New Face of Betrayal." "We need to rethink how we present ourselves to the Middle East. Less protocol, more connection, warmth, energy. Let's not get bogged down in cultural subtext." Then she smiled, right at me. "I mean, they're businessmen. They want deals, not history lessons." Vernon chuckled. Valora did too, murmuring, "That's my girl." I hadn't said a word, not out of fear, but because I knew what silence could do when weaponized. Still, it stung. My years of building trust, studying etiquette, explaining why certain words couldn't be translated directly, they were rewriting it as overcomplication. I didn't defend myself, and maybe that was my first mistake. They weren't just replacing me. They were erasing the idea that I'd ever mattered. Traffic slowed near Zuma, and I glanced at my phone. A new notification lit up the screen. Viratrade had posted a photo. "Meet the future of our leadership." A filtered image of the leadership team lined up in front of the main building. Callista was in the center, flanked by two department heads. Vernon stood to the side, arms crossed, proud. I wasn't in it. My name wasn't in the caption either. It hit me like cold water down my spine. I pulled over near El Matador Beach, stepped out of the car, and let the ocean wind slap some reality into me. The waves roared below, like they'd been holding something back for too long. Looking at that LinkedIn post again, I whispered to no one. They replaced me before they removed me. Maybe that's the cruelest kind of exile, the kind that pretends you were never there. A memory floated back. During one of my first trips to Muscat, a client once told me, "You are not our translator, you are our memory." Back then, I thought it was poetry. Now, I realize it was warning. When they forget your presence, they forget what held things together. I got back into the car, turned off my phone completely, and drove the rest of the way home with the windows down. The air felt cleaner, or maybe I just needed something to feel like mine again. As I pulled into the underground garage of my apartment complex, I sat there for a moment in the dark, engine off, listening to the echo of silence. Then I powered the phone back on. The missed call was still there, unanswered, persistent. This time, I didn't hesitate. I tapped call back. It rang once, then twice. A voice picked up, familiar and sure. "Miss Cole," he said. "We were hoping it was you." The wine didn't taste like much, but I drank it anyway. Half for the ritual, half because I needed something to hold that wasn't a grudge. My apartment was dim, except for the single pendant light above the kitchen counter. Everything else was dark, like the night had agreed to be quiet for once. I laid the leather notebook on the table. It wasn't fancy, just worn from years of use, the spine soft and curved, the corners frayed like an old shirt that had seen too many storms. Inside were notes, handwritten in English and Arabic, line after line of phrases that didn't just translate words, but mapped meaning. Coffee stains dotted the edges. Ink bled through some pages. None of it looked impressive, but it had saved millions in deals. It had saved reputations. I flipped open to a page marked with a folded corner. At the top, Riyadh, Clause Revision, 2021. I remembered that night like it had just happened. One of our contracts had a sentence about mutual obligation, which, when directly translated, implied a power imbalance. Had we sent it that way, the deal would have collapsed. I'd rewritten it with the Arabic concept of wajibat al-ikhtiyariya, the honor of voluntary responsibility. They never asked how I caught that. They just assumed it got handled. Like trust was part of the furniture. They assumed I was the bridge, when really, I was the builder. I turned to another page. Doha, Oman, even a scribbled note about the dinner etiquette in Jeddah. Each page held memories they never cared to ask about. Not once did anyone at Veratrade say, "How did you learn this?" Or, "What made that client trust you after the initial fallout?" It was easier to believe the trust came with the territory, not from the trenches. One voice interrupted my spiral. A memory. Sheikh Hamad's advisor, on a late-night call from Dubai, speaking in clipped English. "Miss Cole," he'd said, "your clarity protects our honor. That is why we listen to you." I had thanked him then, not realizing those words would mean more now than any title ever could. The screen of my phone lit up on the counter. A message. No contact saved. "You didn't deserve what they did. They'll learn the hard way." Just that. No emojis. No follow-up. I stared at it, and for a moment, I couldn't place the number. Then it hit me. Destry. She used to sit across from me during those high-pressure meetings, taking notes, rarely speaking. She saw it all. She saw how I got cut off mid-sentence in front of Vernon, how Callista smiled a little too quickly when I was interrupted. She had seen my erasure begin long before I had. I didn't reply. Not out of coldness, but because some messages say everything without demanding a response. I saved it, labeled the contact D. Quiet witness. People don't always have to scream to stand beside you. Sometimes they just don't leave. That thought stayed with me as I closed the notebook and pushed it gently away. I felt no rush to take action. Not yet. I wasn't plotting revenge. I was building clarity. And maybe that was more dangerous. They thought silence meant surrender. They forgot it could also mean surveillance. I walked to the window. Downtown glimmered in the distance, and my own reflection hovered just beyond the glass. Not broken, not erased, just waiting. I picked up my phone, opened my contacts, and scrolled. Mason Trent. I hadn't spoken to him in nearly 2 years. Not since that conference in Abu Dhabi, where he'd taken notes on everything except the networking happy hour. My thumb hovered over the screen. This wasn't a whim. It was the next sentence. 2 days passed. Enough time for the sting to shift from heat to a dull hum. I'd returned to my routines, if only to stop thinking about the moment everything changed. But on that Thursday afternoon, while lounging on my couch with my laptop open and half a bowl of almonds forgotten beside me, I saw it. An internal stream, still public due to a shared calendar link I'd been accidentally left on. Veratrade's quarterly call with the Emirati client. A big one. The kind of call I used to lead while pacing the room in flats and a scarf, water bottle in hand, contracts memorized and cultural references ready. This time, it wasn't my voice welcoming them. It was Callista's. She stood in front of the camera in a sleek navy blazer, high heels that clicked too loud on the conference room floor, and a confidence that, to the untrained eye, might pass as poise. To me, it read like rehearsal. "We're honored to continue our partnership," she said, smiling at the screen, "and we're looking forward to expanding your trust in our next phase of operations." I leaned forward slightly. The silence on the other end stretched longer than protocol allowed. Then came the voice, calm but sharp. "I'm sorry," said the lead delegate. "We expected to speak with Miss Cole." Callista blinked. "I assure you I've been fully briefed. We have everything prepared." She glanced down, probably at a printed script. When she looked back up, her smile had tightened. "It's an honor to speak with Mr. Al-Kazim." The delegate didn't flinch, but I did. His name wasn't Al-Kazim, it was Al-Kazim. She'd just butchered the pronunciation in front of an entire board. My eyes stayed locked on the screen as she tried to recover, diving into a presentation packed with charts and corporate buzzwords. Behind her, I could see Vernon nodding stiffly. Valora was off camera, of course. She never liked being recorded. They dressed her up for diplomacy, I whispered to no one, but forgot fluency isn't a dress size. The client let her finish, politely, coolly. Then they excused themselves, citing another meeting. The call ended without confirmation of any next steps. I closed my laptop. My living room felt too quiet after that. The phrase rang in my ears like a warning bell I hadn't rung. Later that evening, as the sky shifted from gold to deep indigo, I scrolled through LinkedIn on my phone. There it was. Callista's post. "Wonderful session today with our valued partners in the Gulf," it read. The photo below showed her posed beside the same boardroom table I'd once led from. She tagged Vernon and a few account managers, but not a single mention of the client. Or me. I should have felt hurt. But what I felt was far more dangerous. I felt the subtle thrill of a falling mask. The next morning, Destry messaged me a screenshot. A comment under the post, written in plain but unmistakable language. "We do not proceed without full cultural assurance." No likes, no replies, but it stayed up long enough for the post to lose traction and eventually disappear. I texted Destry one word. "Saw." She replied with a single emoji. I sat with my coffee longer than usual, letting the steam warm my fingers. The implications weren't lost on me. This wasn't a personal insult anymore. This was a structural flaw exposed in public. And Callista? She didn't even know where the cracks had started. Trust doesn't trend. But you'll know when it's gone. By evening, I'd started a new folder on my desktop, titled simply, Continuity. I knew what I was watching unfold. They thought I'd left quietly. But now, the quiet was watching them. The text came in just after I poured the second cup of coffee. It was Saturday, clear and bright. The kind of morning that begged you to ignore reality and pretend the week hadn't kicked you in the ribs. I was standing by the window, watching a neighbor walk her dog in her slippers, when my phone buzzed on the counter. "Valora, your father wants you to reconsider. It's temporary. Let's keep things peaceful." No, "Hi." No, "How are you?" No, "Sorry for how we ambushed you in that conference room." Just that, temporary and peaceful. I stared at it for a while. Letting the words wrap around my throat like a silk scarf meant to feel soft but tugged too tight. They always did this, used language like a trap with polished handles. Help meant obey. Family meant don't question us. And now peaceful meant stay quiet. I muttered out loud, "They want the results of my labor, not the presence of my name." The phrase landed heavy in the air. I put down the coffee and pulled out my laptop. This wasn't going to be one of those spirals where I write emails I never send. This one needed to leave the drafts folder. 3 lines, clear, neutral, non-negotiable, independent consultant status, full autonomy in all client communication and negotiation. Temporary contract, non-renewable, non-trainable, non-transferable. I added one final sentence. If there is agreement on these terms, I am available for 1 quarter. Nothing beyond that will be assumed or implied. Subject line. Proposal. Maelis Cole. Conditional cooperation. I hit send before I could soften it. 5 minutes later, I called Destry. "I sent it," I said, before she could even say hello. "You sure?" she asked. Her voice calm, but I could hear the curiosity behind it. "I'm not doing this to prove anything," I replied. "They need help. But this time, they're going to pay for the clarity they once ignored." Destry gave a low, almost proud exhale. "Good fences make good neighbors, huh?" I smiled. "Robert Frost would have made a hell of a negotiator." We both laughed. Then silence. The kind between two people who've survived something quietly and aren't quite ready to label it. After we hung up, I didn't pace. I didn't stare at the screen waiting for a reply. I opened a folder on my desktop labeled Previous Lies and started dragging in old meeting recordings, one by one. Not because I needed them, but because I wasn't going to let them rewrite the story later. That afternoon passed slowly. I cleaned the fridge, vacuumed under the couch, refiled tax receipts, anything but obsess over that inbox. By sundown, I was flipping through an old journal when the notification pinged. Subject: Proposal. Urgent body preview. Meeting scheduled for Monday, 9 a.m. All senior team members will be present. I didn't smile. I just leaned back and whispered, "They want to talk, but now they'll do it on my terms." The Zoom link opened with the kind of delay that didn't bode well. I was already connected from my home office, coffee warm beside me, hair pulled back tight. I watched the grid of faces populate on screen, Vernon adjusting his tie, Callista positioning herself like she was preparing for a press conference, and some fresh-faced associate fumbling with his notepad like it was his first day at a school play. They'd gone all out. The backdrop in Vira Trade's glass conference room was absurd, overstaged. There were gold-rimmed tea sets and a table of curated dried fruits positioned next to a projector, flashing a loop of our old company logo. Only this time, stylized with a tagline, "Modern, forward, fluent." I almost laughed. It looked like a brand campaign for a startup skincare line, not a $5 million renewal with the most culturally sensitive client portfolio we ever had. From the corner of my screen, the Emirati delegation logged on early. As soon as their faces appeared, everyone on the Vira Trade side shifted uncomfortably in their seats. Everyone except Callista, who smiled as though she'd personally built every relationship we were about to butcher. The call started with Vernon clearing his throat, but the client interrupted almost immediately. "I'm sorry," the lead delegate said, voice level, accent precise. "We expected to speak with Miss Cole." There it was. A sentence. Clean, measured, and devastating. Callista blinked hard. "Of course," she said quickly. "I've been leading on our end. Happy to walk you through everything." Her voice was sugar, but her hands were gripping the edges of the table. "We're fully aligned on what you need." She turned to introduce the junior associate. "This is Aaron. He's been our key liaison with the legal review." Aaron looked like he'd rather disappear. The client offered a polite nod, then glanced down at his notes. "We received a message from Al-Kazim. I believe you sent a follow-up?" Aaron nodded. "Yes, we sent over the clarification." The client paused. He said the phrasing implied obligation on his part alone. Vernon shifted. "There must have been a misunderstanding." "It was translated via Google," Aaron admitted. Out loud, on record, in front of a Gulf delegation. I felt the breath catch in my chest, but I didn't speak. I waited. It was contractually required that I only engage if directly addressed. The client switched mid-sentence into Arabic. What followed was short, but unmistakably sharp. I could feel the air crack across the screen. Then one of the senior advisors, with a soft expression, said in English, "May we ask, is Miss Cole present?" My camera was already on. I unmuted. "Yes, I am. Please go ahead." Callista's neck stiffened like someone had yanked her by a string. I didn't look at her. I looked at the clients. "We acknowledge the phrasing confusion," I said calmly, switching to Arabic mid-sentence. "And we've reverted to the original structure. I've reviewed the draft personally and ensured every term honors the spirit of partnership." There was a beat of silence. Then the delegate nodded once. "Thank you. We can proceed." The meeting continued, not quickly, but smoothly. I responded only when asked. I translated once when an idiom misfired. I offered cultural clarity when one reference felt too American. And when the final screen came up for Q3 rollout, the client looked directly at the camera and said, "We don't respond to decoration, we respond to continuity." He meant it, and they all heard it. Callista didn't speak again. After the call ended, my email pinged. It was from Vernon. Subject: Let's debrief, body. This week sometime might be worth rethinking your timeline. Great work today. I read it once, then hit delete. The room smelled like stale coffee and staged authority. A bowl of hard mints sat untouched on the conference table, and the chairs had been realigned so perfectly it looked like a showroom, not a strategy meeting. I walked in deliberately 5 minutes late. Vernon gave me a clipped nod. Callista, seated at the front with her brand-colored scarf draped just so, didn't even flinch. She was already mid-sentence, narrating the client meeting like it had been some cinematic success. And thankfully, she said, pausing for dramatic effect, our brand position resonated. We emphasized consistency, culture, trust. She glanced around the table like she expected applause. Nobody clapped. Vernon folded his hands. Let's walk through what worked. I didn't say a word. I sank into the seat furthest from the screen and listened. That's what they wanted anyway, for me to listen, not participate. Callista clicked through slides full of abstract words. Alignment, proximity, engagement. Each more hollow than the last. It was all posture and presentation. No substance. Then came the moment that broke her script. The speakerphone lit up. One of the Emirati clients had joined early. Apparently, someone forgot to lock down the line. Hello? Came the voice. Everyone froze. This is Hassan, he continued. Before we continue, may I clarify something? Of course, Callista said, faltering slightly. Go ahead. We agreed to the contract because of Melis Cole, not because of branding or leadership transition. If she hadn't returned, we would not have proceeded. No one moved. Callista tried to chuckle. Yes, well, we're thrilled Melis could step in. Her experience obviously supports, I finally said, cutting through the fog of spin. Cultural assurance isn't about slogans, it's about memory. Vernon opened his mouth, then shut it again. The client continued. We'll proceed with the next review next quarter, but our expectations are unchanged. The line clicked off. Nobody looked at me. They just shifted uncomfortably in their chairs. I didn't wait for anyone to wrap it up. I stood, walked to the door, and left. It wasn't until hours later that the second act of absurdity began. My phone rang while I was loading groceries into the trunk of my car. Valora. I answered, but said nothing. Don't mention this to your father, she started softly, but we really need you to stay a little longer, just through the end of the quarter, just to smooth things over. I laughed, quiet and sharp. Do you call your contractors like this, Mom? Melis. No, seriously. If I weren't your daughter, would you be using this tone? Would you even ask? She didn't answer. Of course she didn't. I closed the trunk. You got what you asked for. Let's not pretend we're anything else now. That silence on her end. It was the closest thing to honesty we'd had in years. Back home, I kicked off my shoes, poured myself a drink, and opened my laptop. There it was. A forwarded email from someone anonymous inside the company. No greeting, just an attached internal memo. Subject: Proposal. Transfer Melis Cole knowledge base to junior staff. Discrete execution timeline. So that was the plan. Extract, package, replace. I stared at the screen for a long moment. My heart didn't race. My hands didn't shake. I just muttered, people will treat you as replaceable until they realize you were the reason the system worked. And then I opened a blank document titled Red Lines. Wednesday evening, just before sunset, I stepped off the elevator into a room that smelled like citrus cleaner and desperation. The lights in the Vira Trade boardroom were too bright, the table too long, and the chairs too new. Vernon had requested an internal strategy recalibration, which, in this family, meant a thinly veiled performance review disguised as a discussion. I was already a guest in my own story. I brought Destry with me. She didn't say much. She didn't have to. Her presence, briefcase in hand, eyes sharp, voice unreadable, was the punctuation I needed. Callista arched a brow the moment we walked in. Valora wasn't present. She preferred to manage from the shadows. "We're glad you could join," Vernon said, his voice professionally bland. "We've been reviewing how best to distribute responsibilities moving forward." I said nothing. Callista launched into a presentation about transitional success planning. The screen behind her lit up with bullet points, like legacy mapping and scalable trust models. I could feel Destry's breath steady beside me. She was ready, so was I. Halfway through the fifth slide, the conference room's AV system pinged. An external participant had joined. Nobody had invited them. The voice came through the speaker before the video even loaded. Calm. Direct. "We weren't informed this was a closed-door meeting," said the client delegate, "and we wanted to be very clear before any realignment takes place." All eyes darted to the screen. Even Callista couldn't mask the panic. "We signed because of Malus Cole," he said. "Not the firm, not the logo, not the family name. Her. If she steps away, the partnership dissolves." Silence. Destry glanced at me, but I was already reaching into my bag. I pulled out the sealed envelope I had labeled that morning, slid it across the table. Slowly, deliberately. Inside was everything. Formal withdrawal notice, completion of deliverables, a timeline for handover, one handwritten note on top. I returned to protect the deal, not the structure. Callista opened her mouth, but Destry spoke first. "As her legal counsel," she said evenly, "I can confirm that Malus's contract is now fulfilled. She has no further obligations to this company. Per her agreement, client communication will now transfer directly to her as an independent consultant, should they choose." Vernon didn't speak. Callista tried. "But we were just finalizing a knowledge transfer." "You can't contain someone who's not trying to stay," I said, standing. No yelling, no slamming of hands or doors. I nodded once. Then I left. I walked out through the lobby, past the receptionist who didn't dare meet my eyes, and into the soft evening light spilling through the glass doors. My heels echoed across the marble like the last words of a conversation they never controlled. By the time I reached the street, a new notification lit up my phone. Subject: Joint Expansion Strategy, Dubai Region, Sender, Mason Trent. I didn't smile, but I felt something far better than satisfaction. I felt free. Thursday hit differently. I was sitting at the Clinoscope co-working hub in downtown LA, the kind of place with concrete floors and plants in impossible corners. A low hum of productivity filled the space. Laptops clicking, coffee grinding, quiet meetings tucked into glass pods. No one here knew who I used to be, only who I was becoming. Mason had just stepped out to take a call when my phone buzzed with a screenshot from Destry. Arabic script. Elegant, formal, familiar. I stared at it for a beat before the translation hit my chest like a quiet drum. "Without her, we would not have trusted your firm again." It was from the UAE client, posted privately within their business consortium's communication board. The kind of message that didn't make headlines, but reshaped relationships behind closed doors. I whispered aloud, more to myself than anyone else. My name finally said out loud, in the language that kept us connected. It wasn't anger that surged. It wasn't even triumph. It was relief. Not the kind that makes you cry, but the kind that steadies your spine. Across town at Veratrade, the walls were starting to bend. Destry's follow-up text filled me in. Callista had drafted a press release, a glowing statement about their strategic renewal in the Gulf, celebrating legacy, innovation, vision, all the right buzzwords. But nowhere was my name mentioned. Then came the post, not from us, from the client, public, direct. "We commend Malus Cole. Cultural trust is personal, not corporate." It went up on LinkedIn mid-morning and spread faster than I could screenshot it. The comments came in from people I hadn't spoken to in years. Former colleagues, clients, even a few reporters I used to dodge at conferences. It wasn't about vengeance. It was about being seen for what you actually did. Vernon didn't call. Callista didn't email. But I could feel the tension pulling them apart from across the city. I sat in the lounge with my laptop balanced on one knee, watching the metrics tick up. I didn't share the post. I didn't repost or even like it. I didn't need to. I didn't speak. But my silence wasn't empty. It echoed where it needed to. People kept tagging me. "You deserve this." Finally. She was always the glue. It's strange how noise can come from the quietest place. How validation, when it's overdue, arrives not with applause, but with precision. Mason came back, holding 2 cups of coffee. He didn't ask what I was smiling at. He just set one beside me and slid a folder across the table. "I think you should see this," he said, eyes sharp but steady. "We're being invited to co-lead a joint regional proposal." I opened the folder. High-level proposal draft, budget mock-ups, client directives. At the top, requested lead, Mayalis Cole. He leaned in slightly. "They asked for you, by name." Friday morning arrived with a quiet clarity I hadn't felt in years. I was already 2 coffees in, and halfway through a final review with Mason's team when my cursor hovered over the opening slide of my keynote deck. The title was clean. Minimal. The first line, however, carried weight. Her judgment protects honor beyond numbers. That wasn't mine. It was from a voice memo, 6 months old, sent at midnight by Sheikh Hamad himself. I'd saved it without sharing it, like a secret someone whispers, and you store in the safest pocket of your pride. Today, it sat on the first slide of a summit deck I'd be presenting to a room full of CEOs, trade consultants, and diplomats next month. I played the recording once more, not to rehearse, just to remember. He'd said it so calmly, so easily. Her judgment protects honor beyond numbers. That wasn't a compliment, it was a conclusion. "You ready for final export?" Mason asked from across the table. "Yeah," I said. "Let's lock it." He nodded and turned back to his screen. But I didn't move. I stared at my own reflection in the black glass of the laptop. The version of me who had walked out of that building wasn't bitter anymore. Just certain. "You never know which seeds will bloom," I said out loud, mostly to myself. But when they do, it's loud even in silence. Mason glanced over. He didn't ask. That's the thing about the right people. They don't need the backstory to know which moment matters. Just as we wrapped the file, my phone lit up with a missed call from a number I didn't recognize. But the area code wasn't new. East Coast. DC. Probably another offer. I tapped over to my email, scrolling through new requests, when one subject line stopped me, cold. Project Retainer, Consulting Opportunity. It was from a firm I knew well. Too well. They'd reached out the week after I left Viratrade. Their Gulf contracts were in shambles, their strategy falling apart. They offered double my rate, unlimited autonomy, access to all past client data if I agreed to clean it up. I never responded. I didn't decline with drama. I didn't forward it to Destry. I didn't even tell Mason. I just left it sitting in the inbox like an unopened apology. Because the truth was, I wasn't here to be a cleaner. I was here to be the architect. At Clinoscope, I was building systems from scratch, the kind that didn't need to be hidden in someone's name or someone's father's office. We were designing pipelines that could scale with cultural nuance baked into the foundation. Real impact, not marketing fluff. My phone pinged again, this time from Destry. Message: "You might want to see Viratrade's quarterly report." I clicked the link she sent, expecting another round of vague PR speak. But there it was. Black and white. Middle East activity, NA, no data. No revenue, no renewals. Just a blank space. "Your worth isn't proven by who hires you," I whispered. "It's confirmed by who can't replace you." I closed the tab, stood up, and stretched. By now they knew. The clients knew. The partners knew. The bridge wasn't just cracked. It was gone. And I wasn't looking back to fix it. Sunday was slow, the kind of day where the sky couldn't decide between fog or light, and the ocean just sat there, wide and unbothered. I needed that. Needed stillness after a week full of glass doors, emails with false civility, and decisions no one was brave enough to say out loud. I walked the path along Palisades Park with no destination in mind. My headphones played an instrumental loop I'd forgotten I liked. The city moved in the background, but I stayed in my own current. The envelope was still in my jacket pocket. I'd seen the handwriting the moment I opened my mailbox, Valora's cursive, looping like it wanted to pretend this was personal, human. I sat on a bench near the bluff, waves crashing below, and opened it without ceremony. Just one page, one sentence centered neatly in the middle. If I hadn't doubted you then, maybe you'd still be here. I didn't protect you, and I regret that. No apology, just regret. Not the kind that asks for healing, the kind that admits you were right, but too late. I didn't cry. Instead, I folded the letter back into thirds and slid it into my bag beside my oldest client notebook. Not to hold on to it, but not to throw it away either. Some things hurt, even if they heal. Some people change, but not always in time to matter. I leaned back, closed my eyes briefly, and let the ocean breeze roll through me like a rinse. I wasn't angry anymore, just done. I pulled out my phone and called Destry. Just confirming final edits for the summit deck, I said as she picked up. No changes, she replied. And the event team's thrilled you're headlining. I'm not headlining, I said automatically. You are now, she replied. The committee bumped 2 other speakers. They want the session closed with your keynote. I let out a small laugh. Not from surprise, but from the odd grace of timing. Forgiveness is not forgetting. It's choosing peace without permission. That's what this was. Not forgiveness, but peace. Chosen by me, not offered by them. As I walked further down the path, I passed a family having brunch on the grass. A little girl tugged her mother's sleeve and pointed at me. "Mom," she said loudly, "she looks like a CEO." I kept walking, but for the first time I smiled, not because of what she saw, but because I no longer needed anyone to say it for me. My phone buzzed again as I reached the stairs near the bluff. I glanced down. Subject, International Client Forum confirmed. You're headlining. No hesitation. No doubt. Just the next chapter waiting. The ballroom in San Francisco was hushed in that way rooms get right before something breaks open. Flags lined the stage, sleek lighting bouncing gently off the silver-rimmed panels. I stood just beyond the curtain, hands loose at my sides, not clutching notes. I didn't need them. The stage manager gave me a quick thumbs up. I stepped into the spotlight. A screen lit up behind me, bearing the title of my keynote, Cultural Trust in Global Infrastructure. I let the silence stretch just long enough to demand attention. People think the biggest deals are signed in boardrooms, I began, but they're sealed in respect, in memory, and in silence. No one moved, no coughs, no clicks of pens or shuffle of chairs, just the collective stillness of people who've come to listen, but didn't know what they were about to learn. I clicked to the next slide, case study charts, timelines, overlays of project outcomes. The data told a story, but I added the spine. Without cultural fluency, we don't negotiate, we misunderstand. I didn't name Viratrade. I didn't need to. The room knew. The failures had already circulated among industry chatter. I walked through the slow unraveling of a client relationship, marked not by disrespect, but neglect. How nuance had been replaced by noise. How relationships, once cultivated, had been repackaged like product features. You can't buy trust, I said plainly. You preserve it, or you lose it. One of the final slides held no numbers, just a quote. The biggest revenge is being remembered after they tried to replace you. I paused. Let it land. Applause didn't erupt. It built. From the front rows to the corners, the kind that starts slow because people are still processing what just hit them. I stepped off stage without bowing, At the hotel, I changed out of my blazer, pulled my hair back into a knot, and sat by the window with a hot mug of tea. The fog outside was rolling in from the bay, soft and slow. That's when the email came in. Forwarded proposal. Unfortunately, due to a lack of cultural continuity and leadership visibility, we will not be renewing. Veratrade had lost another client. I didn't even need to read the body of the message. I forwarded it to Destry. Subject, told you. She replied with a simple, took long enough. I smiled, clicked into a new file. On my laptop was the next project, South Asia expansion. Full scope, design phase. At the top of the contact list was a name I hadn't seen in 3 years. Anish Rao, Mumbai. He'd remembered me, not the company, me. A few hours later, Mason texted. Callista reached out. Through someone we both know. Wants a private conversation. I stared at the message, then typed back. I don't revisit structures I had to dismantle to survive. I didn't block her. I didn't respond again. Some silences speak volumes, and sometimes that's enough. That evening, I sat back by the window, steam curled from the tea in my hand. My phone vibrated one last time before I turned it off for the night. Notification. Middle East delegation requests direct consultation. With you. They didn't ask for my firm. They asked for my name.